Hey, folks, good evening and welcome to Phantoms and Monsters Radio, where the veil between the known and the unknown is lifted one story at a time. I welcome you and all our listeners, including first timers in chat. I hope you find tonight's subject and reports interesting. Now, I will say some of the accounts I'm going to talk about tonight I have presented before. But for some reason, the past couple of weeks has been an inundation of requests for underground horrors or uh, incidents of people seeing things under the ground or in caves and such. So I decided to go ahead and do it. But just warning you, some of these I have talked about in the past. Now, for years, I've collected extraordinary eyewitness reports from across the globe, but few accounts compare to the chilling underground encounters you'll hear tonight. Now, from the jungles of Vietnam to the caverns of Missouri, from the deserts of Arizona to the mountains of Austria, these stories reveal a hidden world beneath our feet, one inhabited by beings and phenomena that defy explanation. Now, these are not isolated tales. They are threads to a larger tapestry of mystery, secrecy, and fear. What you're about to hear are testimonies from veterans, geologists, explorers, and everyday people who stumbled into situations they can neither explain nor forget. These are seasoned, credible individuals who risked their reputations to come forward. Now, some of their accounts speak of reptilian humanoids and anomalous machinery, others of bizarre lights, Bigfoot captivity, and even possible government involvement in keeping these mysteries hidden from the public eye. As investigators and seekers of truth, we must weigh each story with respect while also considering the bigger picture. Are these fragments a larger subterranean reality, one that has remained just out of reach? Could these experiences point toward an underground presence that's been with us for longer than we realize? Tonight, I invite you to journey with me into the shadows below the surface, to confront the possibility that we're not alone, nor above ground, nor beneath it. This is one of the most harrowing collections of underground anomalous activity ever compiled in Phantoms and Monsters Radio. So prepare yourself for unsettling revelations, strange connections, and unfiltered voices to those who have walked into the unknown and survived to tell their stories. But before I proceed, please consider supporting the channel and by clicking the subscribe and like buttons and by you sharing our content. Super chat and super thanks donations are appreciated. You can click the dollar icon located below the chat box. You can also use PayPal or Buy Me a Coffee links that are in the description. Thank you for your support and considerations. Now, your comments are always welcome. Please let me or the moderators know which accounts you found interesting in the presentation or share any suggestions for upcoming shows. Again, I want to thank everyone associated with the channel. Now, if you're in the chat and have a question, please use all caps, and I'll try to get to each one of them after the presentation. Now, this first account I've talked about many times. It's actually a compilation of 3 emails, which included answers to a few of my questions. The man who provided this information was, at the time of the incident, a U.S. Army corporal who had since retired from the military after a lengthy career. Now, he did not give me specifics as to his unit and mission, but he feels strongly that his experience should be told. And he provided 2 identification references, which I checked out and did check out. Now, overall, this man served a distinguished military career, and his reputation is quite admirable from what I have seen. Some of the information has been edited at the request of the witness. Again, this is not the first time I've referenced this encounter. So he tells me, in 1970, I was serving as a corporal in the U.S. Army deployed in South Vietnam in the region about 30 miles south of the DMZ. At the time, I was second in command of a squad of soldiers. We had set up a bivouac in the jungle area that had a few steep hills. That evening, my section was ordered to patrol one of the small valleys west of the encampment. We moved out, led by our sergeant. Not long after entering one of the small valleys, we detected movement ahead of us. It seemed to be a scattering of activity, so we doubted it was the VC, but we weren't positive. We hunkered down for about 15 minutes, getting occasional glimpses of something moving within the trees and brush. There wasn't enough light to detect what we were observing, even though the moonlight was bright that night. Now, after a while, the activity halted, so we continued to move slowly through the valley. As we approached a sheer wall on the hill, it looked like someone or something had stacked large stones and boulders in the pass in front of us. There was also an opening in the hillside that looked like a cave entrance, approximately 5 foot high and 3 foot wide, narrowing at the top. When observing the passageway, it appeared to have been cut away by machinery. The edges were smooth with small, even-spaced grooves. We were puzzled by this because we had never seen enemy caves like this, just underground tunnels. The sergeant suggested that it may be a VC supply depot, so we started to assess how to investigate the cave. About this time, though, things got very strange. We noticed a putrid odor emanating from the cave entrance. The only thing I can compare it to is rotting eggs and human decay. It was so revolting that a few of the soldiers were becoming ill and started to back away into the jungle, including the sergeant. I was directing a light into the entrance to observe anything, but there was a haze that made it impossible to see through. We had no idea what was before us. So the entire squad took a position in the heavy brush approximately 150 feet from the entrance, far enough not to be detected, but close enough to observe the cave entrance. We quietly remained there for what seemed like forever. The jungle was strangely calm, though we heard distant rumblings. It was eerie. The sergeant was sitting near me, talking to himself. He was frightened. I was looking at the rest of the squad. Each of them had wide eyes and scanned the area. No one was going to doze off during this patrol. Now, after several hours, dawn was approaching, and the sky began to lighten. I checked my watch, and it was just before 500 hours. Just then, we noticed movement in front of the cave. A being, I first thought it was a man, moved through the entrance into the clearing in front of the cave. As it stood up from a crouch, it stood at least 7 feet high and started to look in our direction. At that time, another similar looking creature was moving out of the cave. They were making hellish hissing sounds and looked directly at us. The only way I can describe these beings is that they looked like upright lizards. The scaly, shiny skin was very dark, almost black. Snake-like faces with forward-set eyes that were very large. They had arms and legs like a human, but with scaly skin. I did notice a tail, though they wore long one-piece dark green robes. I never noticed that they had anything on their feet. No one gave the order. It seemed like the entire squad opened fire at once. Every piece of vegetation between us and them was quickly sheared away. I yelled out a ceasefire order. At the same time, I was looking in the direction of the cave. There was nothing there. We immediately checked our flanks in case these things circled us, but there was nothing. Now, as we approached the cave, ready to resume action if needed, it became apparent that the beings had escaped, most likely back into the cave. It was soon decided to set charges and close the cave entrance. When we returned to camp, we all seemed to be in a daze. There was little discussion of the incident, and we were never debriefed, so I know the sergeant never filed a report. Then again, if he did, it was kept quiet by the brass. So this next account, the witness tells me, "Hello, I have a weird story I'd like to present for your consideration. There's no explanation as to what occurred, though I believe the supernatural was at play. It was the Christmas season of 1958. My parents and I lived in a small home in eastern Tennessee. We survived on what little money my mother could make doing odd jobs for other people in the area. Now, my father was wounded during the Korean War, and he received a monthly pension from the government. I was 8 years old at the time. After school, I would work around the house and help care for my father. I knew that money was tight and figured there wouldn't be any gift giving that year, but we made the best for what we had. Now, a few days before Christmas Day, I was lying in bed and began to hear noises coming from outside my window. It sounded like children playing and laughing. I got out of bed and looked out the window. I noticed several blue lights bobbing about in my mother's garden. I went and woke my mother. She got up and we walked out onto the porch. We both witnessed the blue lights moving up and down above the garden. It was very cold, so we went back in the house and watched from the bedroom window. The lights were there for over an hour and continued moving about. We were exhausted, so we both went back to sleep. In the morning, we sat at the table eating breakfast. My parents were discussing the blue lights. My father said that he heard of a similar occurrence when he was a boy. The deacon at his church commented to several of the congregation that he noticed blue lights outside the rectory one evening. He explained that these were angels watching over the church. The next few nights, I watched for lights, but they never returned. So on Christmas Eve, a few family friends stopped by the house during the day to wish us happy holidays. My friend Larry came over too. We listened to the radio for most of the afternoon. Now, neither one of us had ever had a television in our home. I mentioned that it would be nice to have one, but I knew that we could never afford it. I told Larry about the blue lights and the story that my father had told me. Larry said that his Uncle Joe told him the same story about the blue lights outside the church rectory, so I figured it must have really happened. Larry also said that his Uncle Joe mentioned that there were little people with big heads and large eyes who lived in the mountains. I asked Larry if his Uncle Joe had ever seen these little people, and Larry said that he just didn't think so. So that evening, my parents and I were sitting in the front room when we heard what sounded like footsteps on the porch. My father went to investigate, but he didn't see anything unusual. I then told them what Larry's Uncle Joe had told him. My father just smiled and said that old Joe told a lot of good stories, though most of them just weren't true. My father then said that he remembered a story that old Joe told him one day. My father said that old Joe told him that the little people of the mountain would bring gifts to folks they liked. He said that old Joe thought that these little people were aliens because he had seen lights fly off the mountain at night. Now, I prodded my father to tell me more, but he said old Joe told too many stories and they were just flat out lies. It's about 10 p.m., so I was set off to bed since we were going to church on Christmas morning. I woke in the middle of the night to get a drink of water. I I overlooked the time, but I believe it was around 1 a.m. or so. I walked down my room into the hallway and noticed the same giggling and laughter I'd heard the night I witnessed the blue lights. The sound was coming from the front room. I slowly walked down the hallway and peered through the corner. There was nothing there, but I did see a square shape on the floor by the bookshelf. I turned on the room light. It was a brand new television, a Motorola. I remember letting out a scream and hearing my mother running down the hallway. She saw me standing in front of the bookshelf, not knowing what was going on. Then she noticed the television. I can still remember the strange look on her face. She turned and ran back into the bedroom, yelling all the way. I could hear her asking about the television while my father answered, "What television?" We sat in the front room just staring at the television, occasionally looking at each other. We never figured out how it had gotten there. I want to think it was the little people in the mountain. In fact, that's what old Joe told everybody who'd listen. And I did talk to this witness, and and the reason I put this in here for the underground thing was they apparently Joe had told them that these little creatures lived in the caves in the mountains. So it's an intriguing story. Is it true? I don't know, but it's interesting. Now, I received an intriguing typed letter in the mail from a guy by the name of Jerry, who now lives on the U.S. West Coast. No contact information was given. A bit of personal information was removed for me to post and to preserve the witness's anonymity. So he tells me, "Sir, this is the first time I'm disclosing my experience in public. My family has been previously informed of the details. At the time, I owned a small business which I had started after I finished a 12-year stint in the military. I was then living near Eldridge, Missouri, and was raised in the general area and knew the terrain well. I had spent time at the U.S. Army Engineering School at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, and some of the training included spelunking. When I left the Army, I continued to explore caves as recreation. Now, in 1993, I helped form a local group of experienced cavers. We would get together on weekends and explore some of the cavern systems throughout Missouri and Arkansas. The experience I'm about to describe took place in the summer of 1995. Now, I was on my own that day, which was not uncommon. I had decided to check out a cave in Camden County, Missouri, which was part of a relatively large system in the area. From what I could tell, this cave had not been explored for an extended period. The entrance was very narrow and well hidden. After squeezing through the opening, I descended another 50 foot or so before the cave began to open into a series of chambers. I moved through several of these chambers, taking my time to examine the area or possible artifacts and formations. I finally reached what I thought was the end of the cave. But I started to hear rustling sounds that were echoing from the small opening near the top of the chamber. I assumed the sounds were bats and didn't pay much attention to them, but after a while I heard a motor and talking. I stood and listened for several minutes, wondering what was on the other side of this chamber. The opening was about 10 feet above me. I maneuvered my way up to the opening, which was flat and narrow, but big enough for me to get a decent look into it. Now, as I positioned myself at the front of the opening, I saw light on the other end. The passageway was only a few foot long, but was just too narrow for me to move through. Now, as I looked through the opening, there was very warm draft of air hitting my face. As well, the air had very acrid vinegar-like odor. There was a vast and well-lit room with limestone walls. I noticed a small vehicle that looked like a golf cart, very low on the ground and without wheels. I continued to observe until I started to hear voices that were getting louder and near. Something was making its way toward the vehicle. I had to rub my eyes because I didn't believe what I was looking at. This creature, because it was not a man, stood about 7 foot and had brown, scaly skin. The face and head were shaped like a human with a flat nose, but there was no ears or hair. The top of the head had a slight scaly ray or ridge that extended down the back of the neck. From what I could see, it had lips and regular sized eyes. The arms were very long and muscular with human like hands. It also had a massive 4 to 5 foot tail that tapered to a point. It was dressed in gold metallic outfit with long pants and shoes. It also carried an oval pack attached to its back. I watched as this thing was looking at something on the vehicle. I had a high-speed camera, which I used to document my cave explorations. I obtained a few distorted images of the being. For some reason, while I was taking photos, the creature stopped and turned, looking in my direction. I'm not sure if it heard me, but it knew of my presence. It then made a terrible hissing sound as it continued to look in my direction. That was enough for me. I quickly started making a beeline out of that cave. When I reached the entrance, I was shaking and hyperventilating. I finally reached my vehicle and drove home. Now, I continue to explore caves and areas. I've heard stories of people encountering strange underground beings, but I still never disclosed my experience. Now, a few years after my experience, I went back to the cave, but I was unable to get near it since the area was now government property. I can assume that I witnessed something that I wasn't supposed to see. It pains me to think what secrets are being kept from us. To those who say that there's no non-humans living among us, well, think again. They're here. I do have the evidence of the experience, but I do not wish to release it at this time. And I have kept up with this Jerry guy for years, and he will not release the photographs, which is something I do run into. I mean, sure, I haven't even seen anything. So I don't know if he really had them or not, but he swears he had something. So I don't know. Now, this next account, the witness tells me, and I'm going to thank, I did get a Bears it. Yeah, thank you for your donation. Very much appreciated. Now, this next witness states, in 2015, I took a trip through northern Arizona. I live in Phoenix, hiking, taking photos, and enjoying nature. At one location, it was late, so I decided to park for a few hours or spend the night in my truck. I had the car turned off with the windows down. There was a giant full moon in the sky behind me, and I was looking at it in my outside rearview mirror. Then this being walked from my left to my right about 4 to 6 feet behind the tail of the truck. I stopped and looked. It stopped and looked at me. It was about 8 foot tall, very shiny with long arms, and its elbows were lower than ours. The neck was about a foot long, pointed forward a bit, oval head, and what looked like 4 foot tube extended from the jaw down forward, almost like a very long beard coming to a point. The moon was behind it, so I saw it in silhouette. It strolled like it was struggling to move. I tried to roll up my window, but the truck was off. Slowly, I slightly turned its shoulders toward me, and that long, freakish neck turned like an insect would. The face is looking right at me. I thought that was it. I'm dead. It seemed so skinny, I figured it was hungry. I had my hand on the keys. If it came towards me, I turned the truck on, rolled the windows, and take off. The head turned back forward and it walked on. I waited a minute, then started the truck and took off. So a few months later, I decided to go back, but in the daytime. I found the exact spot. There was nothing there but dirt and desert, no buildings for miles, all dirt roads. I traveled around the area since I was there, did a bit of hiking, and then came upon a place and parked. It looked like an old crash site with a hole in the ground, burned out rocks and bushes growing in it. Whatever happened there happened a long time ago. Then I heard digging sounds like heavy machinery, trucks backing up, making that beep beep sound like a lot of them do. But there was nothing around me for miles, just desert. I drove around a bit to see where the sound was coming from, but I was all alone out there. I went back to the spot and could hear lots of trucks busy at work, like primary digging construction machines. I then got on my knees and put my ear to the ground. The digging sound was coming from underground. That was odd. Nothing around that would identify the area for construction. Out in the desert on the straightforward road, I saw no one pass by at all. Then I noticed two large, shiny white pickup trucks facing me in the desert, and the windows were black. They seemed to appear out of nowhere, and then two more appeared behind me. It was just me and the four trucks and a lot of people digging under me. I got concerned. I got back in my vehicle and left. Now, after a bit, I slowed down. No one was following me, so I drove until I got to the next road. There was an underpass on the road to go north. I took a right to go south, go under the underpass, and take a left. At both exits were the same big white pickup trucks, the glass tinted black and waiting. Whichever way I turned, one of them would be behind me. I headed south, and the truck behind me immediately took off after me. The other truck turned around and followed. The truck was right on my bumper. It was so large I couldn't see in its window, but the tint was so dark I couldn't see anyone driving anyway. I was going 90 miles an hour, and as it was right on my tail, the other one tried to overtake me. I was weaving between two lanes to keep it from passing. I'd gone into the left lane to block the second truck, and the one behind me tried to pass me on the right. This went on for miles until there was an exit with a few shops. I took that exit, and both trucks slowed, did a U-turn, and returned. I knew that they had my license plate, so I figured I was screwed. I uncovered something they didn't want to be found. I went home and just waited for the knock on the door to be shot or whatever. Nothing happened. I got no contact, no warning, nothing. I was afraid to tell my friends as they might be incriminated as well. Years passed and nothing happened. It's been 7 years now, and I've never gone back to either location. Seeing that thing walking and hearing the digging underground, and then seeing very earthly trucks trying to run me off the road, could there be a connection? I don't know. I stopped going out into the desert from then on. Do you have any idea what the things were that I saw? I'd love some answers. I guess we all would. I have no idea what happened there. I've had a lot of accounts over the years, especially out in deserts, and that was a new one for me. So, is the government involved? Who knows? So, this next account, the original email from the witness was forwarded to me during the Christmas holiday with honest intent in deference to Gregor, the witness. I had exchanged emails with this witness, but some communication difficulties needed to be ironed out since his English was a bit rusty, according to him. Anyway, this is the final version of Gregor's encounter. He tells me, "Hello, Lon. I'm writing to you from where I live in Humanden, Austria. I came across your story about the man who had an encounter with an alien type creature in a cave in the United States. The story is like my encounter in an obscure cave here in Upper Austria. This area is known for salt mines from the former Habsburg Empire. I am a trained certified geologist. I studied at the University of Salzburg and the University of Madison, Wisconsin. I have explored and documented cave systems throughout Austria, the Czech Republic, and Poland since 1988. So in May 2011, I was in a narrow cave that a colleague had recently found. This was approximately 2 kilometers north of Opentron, on the opposite side of the descending mountain range in the foothills near the east bank of Holsetter Lake. As I moved through the complex passageway, I started to hear voices emanating from the darkness ahead of me. I started collecting a few samples from the cave wall, chipping it with my pick. I moved deeper, maybe 50 meters, until I noticed the voices again. Now, I'm familiar with the echoes and the Doppler effect, but this was different. I stood quietly for several minutes until the voices stopped. Again, I moved through the cave, almost crawling at this point. After another 40 meters, I ascended into a chamber that was big enough to accommodate several people. There were 2 wide openings on the opposite side of the chamber. Now, each looked like a machine had excavated it. There was also a noticeable rotting odor. As I examined the chamber, I noticed an odd red iridescence as I passed the light over the rock floor. When I knelt to collect a sample, I again heard voices coming from one of the passageways. Now, at this point, I was terrified and started to hurry back through the narrow cave. After I squeezed back several meters, I was able to turn my head just enough to look back into that dark chamber. A yellow light slowly made its way into the chamber from the left opening in the chamber. Then there were several yellow lights following the first. As the lights moved through the opening into the chamber, then back through the opening on the right, I saw the beings. The sight sent fear throughout my body. I was paralyzed. The creatures were humanoid in stature, but these were not human. Each varied in height, but all looked the same, muscular lizards that walked upright like humans. There is no better term that I can use to identify these beings. These creatures wore dark-colored, full-body uniforms that extended and covered the feet. I couldn't tell the exact color of the skin, but each had a pronounced muzzle. The long tails were very prominent and swiftly swayed back and forth as they moved forward. The arms and legs were massive. I could detect the musculature through the uniforms. There were voices also, as if they were talking to each other. The voices sounded human, though I could not detect the language. There were possibly 20 or more of these creatures as they walked single file through the chamber and into the other opening. Then, when I conceded it was safe to move, I quickly withdrew from the cave. I may have been in shock because I barely remember anything that happened from that point until I reached my office. I decided to keep a private journal regarding my encounter, but I have not discussed it with anyone else. My colleague who initially found the cave told me that he explored the cave since my encounter. Still, he had never mentioned anything about the chamber, other passageways, and bizarre beings. At that point, I'm starting to doubt that I witnessed these creatures. Is it possible that I hallucinated this encounter or possibly experienced something from the past or the future? I'm a trained professional who deals with reality, but my beliefs have been seriously shaken. I appreciate your introspection and thoughts as well as the observation of your readers. Thank you, Gregor. Well, the fact that Gregor wondered if his encounter was a scene from another time in the past or the future suggests that he may have answered his own question. I don't know. I haven't heard back from Gregor over all that time, so I don't know. So this next account, I received, it was May 2015. I received a telephone message from a woman in Muncie, Indiana. She and a companion had witnessed a frightening and unexplained lizard-like humanoid while touring a cave in Harrison County, Indiana. I conducted 2 interviews with the witness, whom I'll refer to as Gigi, and have listed the events described to me. Gigi is a Dominican national, and her English is fair, but it was a bit of a challenge obtaining the information. So I'm going to give you a chronological order as to what she told me, uh, and that's what I'll read from here on. It was Tuesday, August 26th, 2014, 2:30 p.m. during a tour at the Squire Boone Caverns in southern Indiana. The witness and her friend were with a group from Muncie, Indiana. The cavern tour was part of the itinerary after spending the previous day shopping and touring Louisville, Kentucky. The tour had reached an area with many small underground waterfalls. There were a few large flat rocks on the right side of the waterfalls, including a few overhangs. Now, Gigi noticed that appeared to be a bright yellow eye shining from under one of the overhangs. She immediately got chills all over. Her friend asked what she was looking at, so she pointed towards the rocks. She saw the same eye looking back at her. They stood there for about 5 minutes watching the eye as it appeared and disappeared. They were about 30 foot from the rock. There was movement as well, but it was different to make out because the lighting was dim, or difficult to make out because the lighting was dim. Now, when the tour started to move on, Gigi looked back in the direction of the eye and saw something exit from under the overhang. She briefly stopped and watched. It crawled out onto the open rock surface and then stood up on its back legs. Almost immediately, it scurried away in another crevice in the rock. It looked like a lizard of some kind. It had short tail that was dark in color. The arms and legs were long, almost human-like. Gigi thinks it was about 1.5 feet in height. She quickly rejoined the group, but continued to watch behind her. Now, her friend did not see the lizard, but Gigi described it to her after they had got back to the bus. The friend gave her a lorazepam pill to calm her down. Gigi was shaking badly, and others on the bus were noticing her. She did not mention what she saw to the other people in the group. The next day, Gigi felt very ill. It may have been from the pill, but she thinks something happened to her physically and mentally because of what she saw. Gigi doesn't believe she was supposed to see that lizard being. Now, Gigi agreed to allow me to post some of the experience on the blog, the sighting details, and through personal information that won't be disclosed. She's curious if others had seen something similar, and if they did, what was the result? So, could this have been an underground population of saurian humanoids, aliens on Earth? You know, I always go back to what David Eckhart described to me over the years. Are there really undergrounds of these beings? Now, a woman in southeast Ohio claimed that a tribe of Bigfoot would harass her and her family beginning in 1962. At one point, when she was 12 years old, she was held captive in a cave by the creatures. The woman, who is now in her early 60s, requested to remain anonymous and not to reveal the location in Appalachia where the incidents occurred. She stated, "I prefer not to say where this took place specifically, but no one wants an invasion of Bigfoot hunters on private land. Let people go to the public lands like the Wayne National Forest to look for Bigfoot. People down in the hills love where they live because it's quiet. There's fresh air, clean water, great conditions for grazing gardens and children, and the beings in the thick of nature to see the wild animals up close is something that we all value very much. I'd read that people work harder on gathering the mountain of eyewitness reports and experience that have been hidden in the past decades in this state than see them destroy nature." Now, according to her, she wasn't the only one experiencing the encounter. She continued, the creatures were witnessed in part by my parents. People do need to know that these things happen to me. It still pains me greatly, but at least I can talk about it now in some part, though without anyone knowing who I am. People are ruthless. Now, the woman also said that the incidents happened too often to keep a record of them, and that some of the neighbors had similar experiences, including some young boys fishing in a nearby river. Now, these events were supposedly reported to the local police. She also states that at one point, The huge Bigfoot came back to take her, and her father shot it with a 12-gauge shotgun. She says the big one that had always come to take me out of my bedroom at night came this time during the day. Dad was about 15 feet from it. The shot was hitting this thing, and every time it hit, he stumped hard in the ground with one foot after the other. My brothers and I ran up to my bedroom because the youngest said it was higher ground for a better defense. And there were more over in the farmer's drainage ditch across the road. They were huge too. What do you do as a kid and you see something like that? Good thing my three brothers were there with me to help protect me. I yelled to them to leave or they would be hurt. They finally left, but there were a lot of days when we could not leave our 3 acres. My brothers wanted to go check on the neighbors to see if they were okay or needed help. Now, she claims that the Bigfoot were of different sizes, male and female, but that the biggest one was 14-foot male with a head that was at least the size of a basketball. She says his hair was long and about the same texture as mine, as I recall. The hair on all of them was about the same shade of brown, like the color of a decomposed wood layer in the forest. I could see tan skin around its eyes and on its face, especially where it was facial hair. It was sparser with glimpses of skin showing through that area as well. I couldn't make out a neck. Its chin was broad and his teeth were about the size of the nail on my middle finger, but they were flatter. And he had a mouthful of them, meaning that the width of his bite was wide. His mouth was wide enough to show them, all of them. His eyes were dark with some white around them, less so than human eyes. There were crow's feet at the opposite end of them. His skin was weathered, like a farmer who spent a lot of time outside. His shoulders were vast, though I did see his collarbone on one side, which looked thick compared to a human's. He was muscular and heavily built, but in no way fat. There were an adult female and others who were also as big as the female, but didn't seem to be young or old. I don't know if they were all related, but they seemed to be a close-knit group. So there was an adult male and female who seemed to be a couple, and the others who seemed to have maturity and body mass suggested that they were all, or what you'd consider 40-something humans. Other than that, I can't tell what age any of them were. Now, the woman described being taken captive. She says, many of my memories of these creatures were so traumatic that my mind hid them from me. I have no idea what else I've experienced with them in my childhood yet. You see, the memories are still popping up on the surface. And I've got to tell you, it's not a pleasant thing to know that you've been taken innumerable times by these creatures across many hills far from your home. I have no idea what transpired while I was with them, but each time they took me, I was out all night long. She suffered in other ways as well. She said, I was being used in a tug of war and neither side was winning. Certain people at the nearby churches were told what was going on, so they'd take me aside and anoint me with oil and lay hands on me, praying out loud, and all I wanted to do was lie down and go to sleep from that circus. I was confined to the house for weeks, not being allowed to look out any windows. Now, she states that most of the time her captivity was peaceful, but occasionally the creatures became violent. She said I was probably around 12 when I woke up underground in a cave that was dripping water from roots I could see stretched out below the ground. You can't imagine the horror. I was screaming my lungs out, and after a while I ran out of force to make any sounds, but the air kept coming out of me. I could see these creatures surrounding me as I lay there, unable to move on this great slab of rock. I wanted badly to scream some more, but it was just too tired. I was just too tired to do anymore. When I relaxed, they all started smiling and laughing. I thought, okay, they could have killed me and eaten me, but they didn't. Some of them were kind, but then again, I'd seen cats play with mice for hours before killing and eating them. She says that she remembers everything clearly, and so does her family. She says these are not childhood nightmares, as evidenced by the incident that took place around the time I was 12 or 13. Mom asked me questions each time he, the big Bigfoot, came back to my window and took me with him. He took me with his he took me with him many times. After talking to me to get me to tell the big guy not to take me with him and that they told me to tell him no, I was going and that not seemed to work, but pretty much gave up asking me anything. She did talk to Dad about how to stop this from happening, as she thought it was affecting my health and robbing us of our sleep. There was the concern that they did the wrong thing. This creature could kill anyone in the house. Mom often wept to my older sisters about this thing, big hairy thing that got into the chicken coop, and how she needed their help to convince Dad to do something to stop this before someone got hurt. She told them not to go near me and told me not to go near them. She was quite fearful, and I can't blame her. Then the family decided to move her bed downstairs, but this appeared to frustrate the large male Bigfoot. Anyway, she said, I remember hearing him pecking at my window upstairs, but I was strictly forbidden for leaving the area for any reason. He banged on the side of the house, and Dad would yell at him to go away, that he wasn't going to see me anymore, and that was that. He made these loud grunts and stomped on the ground to show his displeasure. I'd heard his thoughts in my head as if he were asking where I was. Now, one day when I was 19, we were on my parents' front stoop talking. Before I left, there was this very long, deafening, deep scream like a man was getting murdered up the road in the woods. Sound did carry, especially on cold nights, but this had excessive volume to it, and no one human could have ever held a full-on scream that long. I thought someone was being hurt up there, and my dad refused to call the sheriff's office to report it. I thought my dad had lost it. But she says she called the sheriff when she returned home. She said the things that they said made me wonder if they were scared of the woods. I asked if they couldn't look for vehicle tracks or boot prints up that lane to the gate, and they finally said that they'd go down there the next day to check. Now, they appreciated that I described the place, and it helped them feel more at ease. They kept saying the station policy was not to go into the woods for any reason. The neighbors and the other kids at school also spoke of their encounters. She said, we weren't talking about our experiences with them, but we were listening to what the others were having to deal with at their places. They called them monsters, creatures, monkey men, giants, etc. We listened to what other neighbors would tell us about them because they thought no one was likely to believe kids who heard it and passed it on. The neighbors next door never spoke about their experience. The woman also added, many times I've read authors saying that they wish they knew, they wish that they would share what they know about the world. Well, that's why I've shared this. Talking about these things has not been easy. I hope it brings awareness to the suffering of experiencers and witnesses and allows them to speak openly about what has happened to them. Unless we all speak the truth, the world won't know what's being hidden and continues to be hidden from us. Do we want future generations to carry on living the same lie? Our world is richer and more interesting than most people would ever imagine. These are not just creatures, they are quite intelligent and resourceful enough to keep from being caught or killed. So that was the last account, folks. You got any questions? Put them in the chat, all caps, please. Got a nice crowd in here tonight as well. I know that last account was a bit drawn out, kind of hard to read as well, but you hear things like that, you wonder how real are those encounters? I mean, And see, John has put in here. I heard reptilians came out of the sewers during Hurricane Katrina. Thanks, Lon. I had I had done a series of encounter reports from a former New Orleans police officer who who's now living in Chicago that swears that he encountered reptilian beings right after Katrina. You know, he has sent me countless encounters and experiences he has had. One day I'll go ahead and pull all of them back out and either put them in a post, a couple posts, or even talk about them on the radio show. But it's quite a story. And also, I've talked to Dark Waters many times about this because he lives in New Orleans. He's heard a lot of stuff. So he's talked about this as well. So who knows? Dagnammit, how do you think there would be lighting in a golf cart in a cave from reptoids? I have no idea. I mean, was it a facility behind the rock face? I don't know. Was there an opening on the other side for these things to get through? Was this something that involved the government? Or, I mean, the government did close it off after a while. So I don't know what he saw. He seemed very credible, though, to me. Nicoletta ASMR. I wonder if technology advances alter or increases reports behavior of these beings. I think to a degree they may, but I think as more people come forward and talk about these experiences, I think it's becoming more mainstream. Look, 20 years ago, I wouldn't get stories like this come to me. I mean, people just did not talk about them. So, but there may be something as far as technology, people understanding technology and other stuff. But I think people are just less inhibited about coming forward and talking about these encounters. Jose Sanchez, Lon, have Pomberos ever been involved in inner Earth stories? They just seem to appear on rural roads or small towns in Central and South America. I don't know. I've heard a lot of stories from down in South America and in Central America, but and honestly, some of the accounts that come from those regions are much different than we get up here in North America. So I don't know. Is it something? Could they be alien beings? Could there be something that we just don't know about? It's hard to tell, but I don't get a whole lot of inner Earth stories, but occasionally I will get one, and many of them have come from South America, but they're usually pretty brief. And of course, the media down there as well, they have no issue about printing these stories also. So you can almost find something very outrageous and very similar to that being reported out every week or so. So, but I do have some sources that come in to me occasionally. Cans Quatch, do you think government underground tunnels have anything to do with underground beings? There have been accounts where people have been in undergrounds, government undergrounds, or municipal undergrounds, especially in Missouri, where people have encountered these beings or something unknown that's described as either being reptilian or humanoid. Um, I think it does have something to do with it. Why it is? Are they in cahoots with the government? Possibly. You think if they weren't, they root them out of there. But apparently, there's a connection somehow. Dagnammit, have you ever heard of a kangaroo horse? No, I haven't. That's the first time I heard that. If you have any stories concerning that, please send them to me. Can Squatch, do you think underground aliens have lived underground for as long as man has been here? Honestly, possibly. Possibly. You go back in time and hear legends and stuff of undergrounds. Even the indigenous people used to talk about the ant people and other creatures that lived underground and that they dealt with. I mean, it very well could have been. I mean, how far back? I don't know. But and a lot of the lore, you do read about and hear about, even in some of the pictographs and such, you see these illustrations of these beings. I don't know how true it is, but I guess it's to be left to each one's individual imagination as to what they really are. Jose Sanchez, have you ever seen the video of really tiny people or beings crossing roads? Not sure if they were even real. I've seen some images. I mean, and some video, especially down from Hispanic America down to South America and Central America. Hold on a second, folks. I'm sorry. Beings crossing roads. Not sure if they were even real. I've seen. Sorry about that. This is my blood sugar alarm just went off. Anyway, I hope that doesn't go off again. Anyway, sorry about that. Next question. Paula S. Lon, do you think elementals could account for any of these sightings? Yeah, I think it's possible. Yeah, it just I guess depends on what you consider to be elementals. I mean, people have a lot of different descriptions or thoughts about what they really are. But yeah, it's entirely possible. I mean, not specifically, I don't know, but you hear about a lot of different things. I mean, or little people, or these fae, or others, are they elementals? Could they be considered elementals? Could they be part of something that we just don't understand or really know about? It's hard to tell, but yeah, I mean, if you want a general answer, absolutely, I think it's possible. Jose Sanchez, do you think that ancient Egyptians may have been very aware and maybe in contact with star beings? Oh, absolutely. I think a lot of what is in their lore and record possibly points toward involvement with extraterrestrials or other otherworldly beings. I think it's entirely possible. I think most of what they had written about and made record of with their everyday life had some connection to these beings, these otherworldly beings. Rachel. Oh, hi, Rachel. I just talked to you today. Hi, we spoke about this today. Do you think many of these sightings are time slips or glimpses of other dimensions? Sure. Yeah, absolutely. It could very well could be. Um, I've heard so many accounts about possible portals or time slips opening up and something unbelievable being seen and then quickly, vanishing or even manifesting. So yeah, absolutely. It could be time slips, could be glitches. Can Squatch, any Pennsylvania underground Sasquatch encounters? Uh, Offhand, I can't think of any. I'm just trying to rack my brain. I don't think so. That I can recall. That's an interesting question. I'll look. I'll look. Got a lot of accounts out of Pennsylvania. Anything else, folks? Okay, well, I want to thank each and all of you for watching and chatting. And if you donated, it's genuinely appreciated. Your support's what makes all this possible. So please like, subscribe, and share. If you have a sighting or encounter report that you'd like to be considered for this show or for the Phantoms and Monsters blog, just forward it to my email, lonstrickler@phantomsandmonsters.com. I will say I did send the Glimmer Man book off to the editor this week. So we'll see how that goes. And when that starts getting close to being released, I will definitely let everybody know about it. So until we meet again, stay healthy, safe, have a great weekend, and good night.